So good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar, how to solve folder frustrations. So here, if we look at a typical folder structure, you can see here there's a document we want to store, and his sales proposal, which is related to the ESTTC project, and it's 2022. So you can see here, the team would define a typical folder structure, and if you start to think, where would I store this file? You've got many options. Is it under sales, customer, project, or proposals? So let's move through that. So what would happen? So the biggest problem is the folder structure itself. There are multiple options on where to save the document, like this. None of them are wrong. All of them cause a compromise and change depending on the who is filing the document. And this causes can cause problems in copying into another area folder just for a convenience sake. Most people experience frustrations with folder-based systems and the efficiencies that these systems bring, inefficiencies, sorry, that these systems bring about have a real drain on our productivity. Folder structures force us to waste time clicking through folder hierarchies, and then when we find the document we were looking for, there are often multiple versions. And because a folder-based system can only be structured one way, all staff in the organization have to live with that one structure, whether it works for them or not. And this is the reality of folder structures that cannot be escaped. It literally is a case of one size has to try and fit all. We have had countless conversations with prospective customers that have come to us because their team cannot agree on the folder structure, and whatever they come up with does not work for everybody. And what is the result? Everyone is frustrated, everyone's productivity is held back, and no one can solve the problem. But the good news is that there is a solution. It just requires a different way of thinking about how we view the documents, which is not where is the document, but is what's the relationships of that document. We already use that solution in other aspects of our lives every day. Whenever you go into Spotify or Netflix, you don't have a folder structure to go through. No one clicks through multiple layers of folders trying to find the movie or piece of music they want to listen to. You do a keyword search, and that keyword search uses the metadata that is tagged to that movie, that TV show, or that song you're looking for. So what you're looking at there is it's metadata that is structured about the content you're trying to look for, and not the where it's stored. Yeah. Here at ICM, we're very proud to be an authorized M-Files delivery partner. M-Files is a very widely recognized leader in information management in regions such as Europe and North America. And it's gradually increasing its brand awareness in Asia Pacific region. M-Files uses that metadata that I was just discussing to classify documents based on what they are and what they're related to. And this helps free us from the rigid folder structures that we're typically used to in SharePoint or a team folder. As you're about to see in the live demonstration that Matt's going to give, M-Files provides multiple pathways to help retrieve documents quickly and easily. M-Files also has an exclusive strategic partnership with Microsoft, which came about in 2025. Essentially, this partnership reflects Microsoft's endorsement of M-Files as its content management platform of choice, and also offers native integration with Microsoft 365 cloud storage, which no other document management system on the market has access to. So here's that typical view we're looking at. You've got a folder structure, and you can see here that either through convenience or by mistake, you've got a document that's stored in two locations. So how would M-Files do this differently? You'd put the the file in one location because we do not have a folder structure anymore. And then what you would do is, based on the metadata that's tagged to that file, you could have a common view that is defined by the administrator that will be used, that can be set up for separate teams. You can have a private view that can be a transient view that if for 1 month you were working on a particular project and you needed to organize groups of files together for a particular way of working for a short period of time, you can create your own private view that would help you solve that problem. But the main thing here is it's the flexibility. When you worry about the what of a document rather than the where of a document, you can then organize views that gives you quick access to the data you're looking for. So now let's see this in action. I'm going to hand over to Matt, and Matt's going to take you through some of the ways of finding data within M files. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the introduction. Everyone, my name's Matthew Lamont. I'm a director here at Innovative Content Management. I head up the technical side of the business. So looking forward to taking you through a demonstration of M files in just a moment. Before we do that though, Chris, could we just backtrack to the second slide there where we had the folder structure for, yep, that's the one there. I just want to ask the people that are here in the audience if we could use the chat, please, just to have a think about this example before we go too much further. This document here, if we're producing a sales proposal for a customer called the ESTT Corporation, so you can see their folder there in that structure, whereabouts would you save that document in this structure? I'm just curious to know where people would save that before we go too much further, just to help set the scene. So feel free to use the chat and make some suggestions there. See if there's any suggestions coming in. I can see Peterina is typing. So Peterina is saying put it in the sales folder and tag it to Andy. Okay, that's one option. Okay, Julie is saying put it in the customer proposal folder. So there's two options there. Thanks, Julie. Okay, I can see Kanal's typing something. Just wait for this to come in. So you can see already just the two answers we've had already. People are putting it into different places within that folder structure. Kanal's already said, no, this is no good at all. You can't use this, this structure. Hang on, Julie's come back and said customer name / proposal. Yeah, so the problem with this particular structure here, because it is a folder-based system, we're stuck with that structure. Okay, and that's what makes everyone so frustrated, because essentially you're making a judgment call where you save a document into a folder-based system. And that may or may not suit everyone's way of working or way of thinking. So when you save a document, say we put it into the ESTT customer folder today, one of our colleagues might come along next week looking for that document and they can't find it. So they go looking in Andy's folder, they go looking in the 2022 folder. Where is this document? They eventually track it down within the customer folder and think, well, wouldn't it be great to have a copy in another folder just for convenience sake, like Chris was talking about before? And that's how we get into version problems. That's how we get version confusion with our documents when we're making copies around. So really, the folder structure is quite rigid that we've all been brought up on, like we've all been using it for, you know, since we went through high school, university, that sort of thing. It's what we're used to, but there are better ways out there, and that's what we're going to try and introduce you here today. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can I just confirm that's coming up, Chris, please, before I go any further?
Yeah, you're all good.
Yep, fantastic. Okay, this is the M files interface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through some different ways that we can look for documents that are saved into our M files. Just give me a thumbs up at the moment if your company uses a network drive or a SharePoint site. Are people using that here today? Just give me a thumbs up if you are. Yep, Kanal's got his hands up. Let's see a couple of other people typing. Tatum is. All right, so the way I just set the scene there, you're probably familiar with these sorts of problems, okay? When you're saving documents into a SharePoint site or a network folder, you can waste a lot of time trying to find those documents. So one of the things that we can do with M files straight up is we can connect M files to a SharePoint site or a network drive or both. Okay, if you look at where my mouse is down here, bottom left, I've got connections from my M files desktop here through to a network drive on my server. And I've also got documents saved here in a SharePoint site. What having M files connected to those repositories does is M files has a very, very powerful searching capability, much, much more powerful than SharePoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how quickly and easily it is to find a document that is saved within a SharePoint site through M files. Now, just to prove that I'm not making this up, here is my SharePoint site. Okay, we've got a few documents saved here in the SharePoint site. All the way down the bottom here, we've got this CV for Kimberly. Okay, so that's tucked away in our SharePoint site. I am going to do a quick keyword search using this Google style search bar up the top of my M files. And I'm just going to search for Kimberly's last name. So her last name's Miller. Okay, so you can see there straight away, there is that CV for Kimberly. And when I click on this metadata pane, this is telling me here that this document is saved within my SharePoint site. Okay, so you can see how quickly that document came back just by doing a very basic keyword search through my M files, which is connected to SharePoint. Okay, very similar principle for finding documents that are in a network drive as well. Okay, now I know in that demo server, I have got a whole heap of project documents. The document I'm looking for is a support log that I've been working on for one of my projects. So I'm going to do a keyword search for the term support log and just see what comes back. Okay, so watch how quickly this works. All right, there's over about 1,500 documents in this entire repository here. So this has brought back 9 results here. And you can see that that highlighted text there, that is the matching search terms that M files has found looking for that document in my network drive. Now, if I click on the document metadata, you can see there it's telling me that that document lives in my demo server. And I can double click on that document and open it up. Oh, my Acrobat's having a bit of an issue here. Just try that one more time and see if it's going to cooperate. No, that's my Acrobat. But you can see how quickly that document came back in a keyword search. So one of the quickest wins that any company can have if they're having trouble finding documents in a SharePoint site or in a network drive repository is connecting M files up to get access to this indexed searching capability. All right. Now, what we prefer to do when we roll out M files is connecting M files to network repositories, SharePoint sites. That's always very useful, but it is much, much better to have your content saved within the M files repository itself, because that way we have access to the full range of M files capabilities like workflows, automatic permissions to set up who can and can't see those documents, whereas that's a little bit harder when those documents are tucked away in another repository that's connected. So storing your content in M files gives you that full range of capabilities. Okay, I'm going to do a keyword search here now for an invoice that I'm looking for. Okay, so the invoice relates to one of the projects that we've been working on in this M files vault. And I'm just going to give it a really vague search term at the moment. Now, the invoice I'm looking for relates to a client called Oracle Accounting. So I'm just going to type in Oracle invoice. Oops. And these are all the documents here that have matched my search terms. Okay, so you can see that I've used a very vague search term, and it's brought back quite a number of invoices here that I can look through and have a look at. Now, what we're going to do, this one here that's got invoice number 0041, we're going to look at some different ways that we can find this invoice through M files. Now, one of the strengths of M files is the way that you can have multiple pathways through to the same document, so that this frees you from that rigid folder structure that Chris was talking about in the opening presentation. Okay, so that way we're not tied to where a document is stored. We have multiple ways of finding that document, and that saves us time throughout the course of a working day. All right, in this metadata card and preview for this invoice here, I'll just give a brief overview about what's going on. One of the big differentiators between M-Files and a normal folder-based system is that we don't pick a folder to save the document into. What we do is we give the document metadata, and all we're doing is we're telling M-Files what sort of document it is and what it relates to. Okay, very, very simple. So in this case, this document has been filed against this accounts receivable class. Then we've got some other information here, like the date that the invoice was issued on, the financial year that it relates to. It is tagged to our client there as the debtor, the person who's paying, and we've also tagged it to the project that it relates to as well. So as the presentation goes on this morning, you'll see how this metadata aids our ability to find these documents very quickly and easily. All right, so just another very quick keyword searching example before I move on. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to look for an email from Outlook that has been saved into M-Files, okay? We all know those problems we have with keeping emails in our inboxes, especially when we're collaborating with other people. Hard to keep track on visibility of what's been said back and forth to a client when you're working on a project. But I'm going to search for an email here, and it's to do with a project update. Okay, so again, just using some vague keywords. All right, this has brought back quite a number of documents here. It's a little bit too much for my liking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some filtering here just to help narrow down our search results. Okay, over here on the left-hand side, we've got a couple of filters that we can use. Now, because I'm looking for an email, I know the file extension that I'm looking for. So I can filter this list down and I can say, look, I'm looking for a PDF, or I'm looking for a Word document, or in this case, I'm looking for an EML file, which is the format that New Outlook uses. Okay, so we've gone from 76 results down to 10 now. This is the email that I'm looking for here. Okay, so I can see that it relates to that project there. I've got a record of who the email is from and to. And by the way, M-Files records that metadata automatically. There's no need for us to manually enter that. And there on the right-hand side is a preview of that email. Okay, so we've got nice visibility over our correspondence from our team back and forth to the client. That's not hidden away in someone's email inbox. Okay, so you can see how quickly and easily that keyword searching approach to finding documents is. Those documents were coming back within a matter of seconds. I'm just going to throw to the audience one more time in the chat. I'm just interested to know, like on an average working day, how many documents do you think you would search for? I did a count myself yesterday. I was around about the 20 mark. So I'm just curious in the chat, how many documents do you think you would look for on a day-to-day basis? So emails, reports, documents that you're working on with other people. What have people got to say there? Just keeping an eye on the chat. Julie says 20, Melissa says 30. A couple of other people typing away there. Canal says 25 to 30. Yeah, so I was on about the money with the 20 that I said before. So if you think about it, looking for 20 or 30 documents a day, like even if we could save you a minute per document searched, that adds up over the course of a day. There's 20 minutes you've got back in your pocket every day. Over the course of a week, that's an hour 40. So that's an hour 40 freed up to do high value work, or perhaps get to the beach a bit earlier on a Friday afternoon. So that's where the strength of M-Files there with finding documents quickly really has a strong value proposition. Okay, moving on just onto a slightly different topic here. One of the other strengths of M-Files is that it doesn't just hold documents. We can also hold information about things like contacts, information about our employees, information about quotes or projects. So if I go into this is called a view, my client list. you can see here that I've got all sorts of information about the clients that are set up in this mFiles repository. So you can see there I've got all of my normal CRM information, like the type of contact it is, their ABN, who's the account manager from my company, all sorts of contact details there as well. Now, this information can either be created manually from within mFiles, or it can be imported in bulk, or in some other situations, we can connect mFiles to a CRM platform or an ERP application, and that information gets pushed into mFiles, so that information is here and it's kept current and it serves as a single source of truth about your corporate information. Now, you're probably wondering why we're storing this information here. The answer is this is really pivotal, in terms of solving that problem of having to choose one folder location in a folder-based system. Because what we can do is use these, what we call objects, metadata-based objects. We can use these as reference points to tag our documents against, and that gives us multiple pathways through to find our documents quickly and easily, which is what I'm about to demonstrate. All right, if I go back to my mFiles homepage, I've got another view here called projects. So if we hop in here, these are all the projects that we're working on at the moment. If I click on this project here as an example, I can look at that metadata and I can see who is involved internally. I can see who the client is, what the project's about, and I can keep information there about different milestones that we're working towards on this project. But this project then serves as an anchor point to tag documents against that relate to that project. If I was to expand that project here, you can see that little arrowhead where I'm hovering at the moment. I can see everything there that is related to this project. Okay, so I can see the client and I can see their details there at one click. I can see who the project manager is, which is myself. There's my information there. And I can see all of the documents that are currently tagged to that project. Now, if we have a look at this, there's invoice 0041, which we looked at just before. Okay, so that's the document we looked at before when we did the keyword search. I've just found it a slightly different way. So let's take a slightly different take on that. If I go back to my client list, now you remember that the invoice was tagged to Oracle Accounting. Okay, there's Oracle Accounting there, that's the client. If I double click on this, this opens up what mFiles calls a workspace. And this is a slightly different version of what we looked at before when we expanded that project. We can see everything that is related to this client. And this gives us what mFiles calls a 360-degree view of that client. We can see all of these people's contact information here that relate to that client. I can see a service agreement. I can see the non-disclosure agreement between our company and the client. I can see all the projects that we've worked on for that client there. And if I look at the documents, there is our good friend invoice 0041 once again. This is not a copy of the document. This is just finding that document through a different pathway, thanks to the metadata that's on that document. Okay, changing slightly to a different direction here, you might remember Chris talking in the opening presentation about what mFiles called dynamic views. Okay. Now, what dynamic views do is these provide yet another way of finding information in mFiles very, very quickly and easily. Now, all of these, what you might call a folder on the homepage of mFiles, these are all the dynamic views that have been set up in this repository. Now, these mimic the behavior of folders in a SharePoint system or a network drive, but they behave slightly differently, and they're set up very differently from the way that you would set up a folder structure. Okay, all of these views here are based on metadata filters. Okay, so we can specify different parameters to view our information. So as a good example here, just continuing on our invoice theme, we've got a view set up here for our account receivable invoices. When I hop in here, you can see a range of different subviews. Now, these are views that have been set up with slightly different filters to let us see the information in different ways. So in this view here, I can see all of the AR invoices that are in this system. And when I hop in here, the views allow the administrator to set up columns of metadata, okay, so that we can see what workflow state an invoice is up to. And we can also sort this information according to a metadata column here as well. Okay, so we can sort by workflow state, or I could look at the payment due date and I can sort that information from most recent to oldest and vice versa. Okay, in this view here, we're looking at the same documents, but just arranged in a slightly different way. Okay, so this is invoices grouped by our clients, just for convenience sake. And these are invoices that have been tagged to a project. Okay, so the metadata on those documents allows us to set these views up in different ways to suit different circumstances. Okay. Now in M files, you've got what are called private views, which are the ones at the top here, and these relate to an individual user. Okay, so I've got a private view set up here called service agreements effective from 2025. No other user in my system can see that private view. Here we've got common views, and these have been set up by the administrator to be available to either everyone across the board or to certain groups of people. Okay, so as an example, legal documents, that common view may or may not be relevant to everyone in the organization. So that's the kind of view that we might make available to certain groups of people, but perhaps other people that don't need to see those documents, we can keep that view hidden from them if we wanted to. Now, this is the fantastic thing about M files that helps us get away from those rigid folder structures. These views can be deleted and they don't affect our content. If we find that the common views are not working for our staff, we can choose to delete them if we're an administrator, and the administrator can help us set up new views that suit our requirements a little bit better. But the great thing is that individual users can set up their own private views to access information on their own terms. All right, so let's say, for example, here that Paul, who I'm logged in as at the moment, he might be responsible for chasing up overdue invoices. Okay, that's part of his day-to-day job. He might need to be able to see overdue invoices really quickly and easily, and he can do that through a private view. So I'll show you how quickly and easily these are set up with the help of an administrator. There's a button down the bottom here called Create a View. We're just going to call this overdue invoices. Okay, the administrator will know the structure of the vault very well, so they'll be able to set these up very easily. What we've got to do is we've got to set up some filters to help us work out what kind of information we want. Okay, now I know the structure of this vault very well, and the metadata property that I'm going to use is called accounts receivable document type. So you'll see what happens here when I search for this metadata property. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, there it is, accounts payable document type. I want to see all of the supplier invoices. Now I need a way to see the overdue ones. Now these documents go through an M files workflow and they help us keep track of whether invoices are being issued to the client, whether they're coming up for payment, or whether they're past the due date. Now we've got a workflow state set up there called overdue. So what I'm going to do is put another filter on these just to help me find my overdue invoices. Now the metadata property that we need for this one is called state. So there we go. So there is my workflow state that I'm looking for. AR invoice is overdue. So if I hit apply, okay, that should be bringing back all of the documents that are overdue. So that's telling me there that there's no overdue invoices there at the moment. Okay, so we can save that view. All right, and there is that view there for Paul. only accessible to him. Once he is finished with that view, if he doesn't need it anymore, he can right click and go delete, and that view then disappears. All right, so this gives us that flexibility to customize our workspace without affecting the way that other people see their information. All right, if I go to a different login, this just reinforces the point that I was making before, that we can set it up differently for individual people. Now, I'm now logged in as Bill. Now, Bill needs to see the invoices in a slightly different way. So he needs to see them grouped by financial year and by debtor. So if we click in here, there are all the invoices grouped by financial year, and then they're grouped by client. Okay, so that keeps Bill happy. He can see that information the way that he needs it to do his work. So he's not being held back by a folder structure. Okay, just coming towards the end of the demonstration here, there's two more things I'd like to show you. Usually when we introduce people to M files, they think, yes, metadata is great, looks really good, but isn't it a bit painful to get the metadata onto those documents? And the answer is not really, okay? We actually have tools available to us these days that help us get the metadata onto documents automatically without manual input needed from the users. So if I hop back into my accounts receivable, okay, we've got about a dozen invoices here that have been saved into M files, but you'll see that the file title there is incomplete and they're missing a whole lot of metadata there. So if we look at this document, okay, so we've got an invoice here to Australian Pharmacies. The ID number for that document, the unique ID there is 1404. So we're going to have a look at this document after I run some automation to put metadata onto these documents. What M files can do is it can use generative AI to scan through a document, and it can read information like the invoice number, the amount, and so forth, and it can populate this metadata for us. So I'm just going to jump quickly into the back end of M files here. So again, I'm working as an administrator. I'm just going to start this off. This is a background instance of the generative AI, and that will take maybe 1 or 2 minutes just to run. So I'll let that do its thing. While that's running, I'm just going to show you one last thing in M files before we come back and look at these documents that have been populated. Okay, I'm just going to search for a document in my repository. Again, I've used a quick keyword search there. I'm looking for this fieldwork plan. The way that M files works with versions also helps to solve that problem we have with version control, having multiple versions of a document floating around in our system. All right, so we can see this document here is a project plan that's been worked on by our team. Now, there's a few different ways we can look at who has been working on this document and when. Okay, if I click on this button here, this gives me access to an activity feed of the document, and we can see who has been working on the document, who created it, who's been working on it and when, and whether they've edited the content of the document or its metadata. So that's one way of looking at that. However, if I right-click this document and go open the version history, this gives us a more detailed overview of how that document has evolved over time. So what has happened here on the 28th of April is Bill has created the document. He's made some more changes not long after, and then Barbara has come along and edited the document as well. Now, instead of creating another file to represent an older version of that document, M files keeps it all in the one object and it layers changes one on top of the other. So that way we can see all of our different iterations of the document. We've still got all of our versions intact, but it means that we're not having multiple copies of that file with ambiguous file titles floating around, causing confusion. What that means is when you double click on a document in M files like this one here, this is the latest version, 100% guaranteed, because it is very, very hard to open up an older version. If I go back to the version history and try and open up version 2, it tells me you're trying to open up something that's not the latest version. Okay, so it really helps to solve that version control problem. Okay, just going back to our accounts receivable, I'm going to jump into this view now. All right. These are our documents that have been processed by the generative AI just while I was showing you that version history. Here is the document that we looked at before that didn't have metadata on it. Okay, so ID 1404, made out to Australian pharmacies. So let's just do some quick spot checks to make sure that this document has been correctly classified. Okay, document date 22nd of April 2026. So there it is there in the invoice details section. The amount 5,131.50. There's the total down there. It's been tagged to Australian pharmacies, so it's got that information from that section of the invoice there. And it's also pulled out the purchase order number as well. So that's that bit of information there, PO-OST 2026. So we've got some great tools available to us these days to help us classify our documents with minimum manual input. I'm going to stop speaking there. I'll hand back to Chris because I've gone slightly over on my demo. So thanks, and back to you, Chris.
Thank you for that, Matt. Just share my screen. And just move forward. Sorry, I should be prepared for that, shouldn't I? Okay, so what you were just seeing from Matt's demonstration is the value of having a single source of truth. We can quickly identify documents. What Matt didn't show you was you can also add to them is expiry dates. So if you had documents that needed regular review, you can set expiry date, put them in a workflow, and we can notify people when they age. And you also started seeing that the more and more data you put into the system in different classes of document, when Matt did the 360 review of a business, you can see all the files that relate to that business. That's the summary of the demo. So now we're open to the floor. If you've got any questions, please let us know. Can they come off mute? Okay, Matt?
You can either use your microphone, everyone, we can unmute you, or you can use the chat. I can see a question there from Gerald, which I'll just take while we see if there's any other questions. Gerald's question was, aren't we just replacing the discipline required in saving information into specific folders with having to enter metadata instead? Yes and no, Gerald. It's there is still a degree of human involvement to classify a document in M files. We've got the automation there, which will help compare documents that are already in the repository to help the user put it against the correct class. Once a document's in M files, though, if it's been incorrectly classified, that metadata can be edited. But that's usually a training and enablement issue to make sure that people are aware of where within the classification they would store their documents. But yep, that's a fair point. But the generative AI certainly helps these days. And Gerald's just said impressed with the Gen AI, and yes, so are we. It's doing a great job.
And Matt, hi. Just while we're waiting, it's Rowena here. Just wanted to add, you mentioned how you can save emails from new Outlook, just the normal everyday Outlook that everybody loves. We can save emails from that as well.
Yeah, M Files is making it a lot easier these days when it comes to saving correspondence from Outlook. It released a module last year that adds automation to that. So what you can do is you can save a single email on a conversation, on an email trail, and M Files will then save that email trail into M Files from Outlook automatically. You've only got to tag one email on a chain, and any replies back and forth, those replies will go directly into M Files with the set of metadata that's been put onto them by that original email. So the feedback we're getting from our customers is that's saving a lot of time, and it's increasing visibility of correspondence outwards from the organization so that people who are involved in projects, jobs, quotes, they know what's been said and done to the external stakeholders by seeing that correspondence. Megan's got a question there. With the approval process, how do you send or set up that workflow to have another person review the document? Really quickly, Megan, I'll just show you the back end of M Files and you can see how this is done. Setting up workflows in M Files is just done through a graphical interface. So it's there's an example of a workflow there. Okay,
You're
so
not
the
sharing at the
document
moment,
might
Matt.
be, oh, sorry. Okay, my mistake. Here we go. Okay, is that visible now?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, this is the back end of mFiles there, where you can set up workflows. And like I was just saying before, it's a graphical interface. There's no coding involved. So it's quite easy for us to train administrators on how to build workflows. So this is one here for a service agreement. So the service agreement might get created and drafted, gets saved into mFiles. It might meet some sort of parameter in terms of dollar value or whatever you might have, whatever's a business rule. And that might notify a certain person in the organization that, look, this new agreement is in place. You need to notify your team. There, where the service agreement is currently in effect, we can monitor dates for when the service agreement is due to expire. And that way that can notify the responsible person that that agreement is coming up for expiry and they need to get in touch with the client to renegotiate, or whether they're going to terminate or whatever might need to happen. So yeah, workflows are very effective in mFiles. They cut out email trails back and forth with having to work out reviews and approvals. Gives you visibility over where your approvals are in that process within the workflow, and they're relatively easy to set up and configure.
Yeah. One key thing to note here, Matt, is we have only just brushed the surface today of the capabilities of mFiles. And please get in contact if anyone wants a tailored demonstration. We're more than willing to go through and spend more time taking you through unique use cases.
Absolutely. mFiles is hugely versatile. We've set it up for use cases like accounts payable, like you saw before with those invoices, contract management. So being able to monitor when contracts are due for renegotiation. Controlled documents is an excellent use case for mFiles. It really solves that problem of staff being able to access the latest approved version of SOPs, policies, manuals, that sort of thing. It does a great job on that. It really is a compliance-based platform. So where you work in regulated industries where you might be subject to audit, you need to prove to an auditor who's been working on a document when, look at decision-making chains and be able to trace those. That's where mFiles really comes to the fore. So we've helped people get ISO 9001 accreditation with this platform, and very effective. Just got one more question there from Gerald. Is any data stored, processed outside Australia? In particular, how is the Gen I handled from a privacy perspective? Okay, good question, Gerald. In the mFiles cloud, the data is stored in Microsoft data centers in Sydney and Melbourne. Okay, the AI servers are also based in Australia. You've got a choice where that data goes, whether it goes to an Australian server or a US server or a European-based server. So you've got control over that. None of that information that's held within mFiles is exposed to a public LLM. It's not used for training those large language models like you do when you put your information into ChatGPT or Gemini, for example. So like I said before, mFiles is really built around security and compliance. It's fully built on Microsoft. We even have the ability now to store the content inside of Microsoft 365. So if your organization is using Copilot, for example, Copilot has got native access to that content within Microsoft 365. So it's a very, very effective and secure platform for your data. Okay, I think that's it for questions. I'm happy to stay on for 1 or 2 minutes, but otherwise, thanks everyone for coming along today. Thanks for your participation, and hope you got value out of what you saw.
And just Rowena here, I would just like to add, I'm just putting in the chat some links to our YouTube page. It has a number of short clips that explain a bit more about mFiles functions, and also our LinkedIn page where we do post updates quite regularly and information. So yeah, please follow us and see what we're up to. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks
everybody.
everyone. We'll leave it there. Enjoy your day.
Thanks. See you later.